Okay, we're back and we'll continue our discussion about AHIMA, why you should join your professional association, and other related topics. So, what exactly are ethics? Ethics, at its most simplest definition, are judgments about what is right, what is wrong. Each professional association normally has a code of ethics. In other words, what is right or wrong that is pertinent in the context, in our case, of health information management. Each of the health management careers has ethical standards of practice. So, in other words, as it pertains to health information management, we don't just code something based on what gives us the most reimbursement. We do that, we code things based on what's documented. And you'll see the AHIMA Code of Ethics when you join the American Health Information Management Association, and you're expected to comply with those ethics. It's always helpful to be familiar with your professional association's code of ethics and abide by them as a student. You hear a lot of talk about cultural diversity, cultural competence, and people use the terms interchangeably. They're actually two different things. Diversity is any type of differences that exist between people in a group. And it could be not only ethnicity or racial, but it could be age, education, gender, gender identity, national origin, occupation, religion, sexual orientation, or socioeconomic status. And in healthcare, we have to interact with people effectively from all different walks of life and all different socioeconomic stratas. And we have to be mindful that each of these people has a set of moral guidelines, ethics, if you will, that are unique and particular to them. As employees or potential employees working in healthcare, we have to be aware of these diverse cultural differences and disparities that exist. What cultural competence is the ability to identify and understand these different differences. And again, healthcare organizations are legally responsible by federal law, so we don't discriminate against people based on age, ethnicity, race, religious faith, or anything else that's covered under the Equal Employment Opportunity Act. We also have health equity. And in August of 2021, AHIMA published a white paper entitled AHIMA's Public Policy Statement on Health Equity. The policy statement identified the need to address the cultural and health disparities that exist through the establishment of public policies. And these include such things as encourage standard collection of patient data, guarantee the right to all have access to affordable, high-quality health coverage, promote the leveraging of technology to analyze quality care and outcomes, promoting healthcare delivery and finance models that focus on promotion, and address human capital and educational needs of the healthcare workforce of the future. Another thing you'll hear mentioned in association meetings, and we call it something different here at Lane, is the professional practice experience. And this is an internship, if you will, where students get on-the-job experience prior to their graduating. It's essentially on-the-job training. And we have some requirements for that at Lane, where we call it here cooperative education. One of it, which is we have patient confidentiality, we have confidentiality statements, we have contracts with the different facilities, and failure to abide by these may result in severe consequences, including expulsion from the academic program. You may want to consider joining the American Health Information Management Association. You get a lot of benefits, including access to all different types of publications, the members only website, networking, leads on jobs, reduced certification exam fees, scholarships, and grants. There are other things that we can do to stay abreast in the field, one of which is joining a listserv and subscribing to these different discussion forums. There's several of them. I post them on our HAM student bulletin board, but I'd strongly advise you to take advantage of these, join your professional association for HEMA, get those reduced certification exams, you get a discount on books and many other benefits. And that's all I have for you. We'll see you online. Have a good day.